today's presentation, I want to show you a different idea for why housing the construction workforce makes sense of public investment. Because it's a different idea, because normally when we think of housing issues after a natural disaster, normally we talk about the social benefits of providing temporary accommodation for displaced residents, for low-income people, and for rentals for those affected by the disaster. Typical examples include like modular homes, temporary villages, and FEMA trailers. That's all very important. But what I want to talk about is what housing the construction workforce does for the longer-term reconstruction and for promoting the regional economic development. That's actually crucial because if we want increased investment in temporary accommodation programs for construction workers, we need to interest the government in this. The local government has to step up. Central government like MB and SARA maybe need a role to play. So we need to appeal to them. They understand that by helping with such an investment, no matter it is a pure public investment or public-private partnership, they actually help with three things. They help build a stable, skilled local workforce and promote the development of local economy by creating more and better jobs, and they also help speed up the recovery. What Christchurch or perhaps the whole country needs are highly skilled engineers, tradespeople, and other construction professionals to undertake large-scale and complex rebuild projects. Many engineering consultancies I've been talking to mention that they need seismically experienced engineers from overseas, so they invest heavily in recruiting such skills from overseas. It actually creates a unique opportunity for skill transfer and also develops the skills of the local workforce. That higher quality local workforce actually will be the key driver of creating jobs and creating higher capital earnings in Christchurch. And also, employees in the construction industry find it increasingly difficult finding suitable accommodation for their out-of-town workers. As a company, if you do not provide a decent place for them to stay, you will be less competitive, especially in the construction industry. Workers are more mobile. They will be poached by other businesses. So higher salaries paid to the workers are not the only consideration in retaining a skilled workforce. Without a decent and affordable accommodation to attract out-of-town workers, simply the construction industry reported that big construction projects in Christchurch will not find a skilled local workforce and may not even proceed. So when we talk about promoting local economy, we don't first think about providing accommodation for workers. One of the highlights in Christchurch for the recovery has been get the CBD back, like what Tracy just mentioned. We need investment in the CBD to boost the local economy and also provide better jobs. So my argument here is essentially that investing in housing construction workforce can do exactly the same thing, but in a different way. It can also attract investment for the commercial rebuild in the CBD, somehow in an indirect way. Let's turn to some numbers on this. If we look at the research evidence on how much expansion of workforce across construction organizations in Canterbury, this range from 10% to 60% of new employees sourced from overseas. If we take into consideration of how many of these people will stay around in Canterbury without moving to somewhere else after the rebuild, at least 30% of them will stay permanently. And then we take the research on how much skills development and skills transfer can drive the job creation for the future. According to research in the United States, a significant part of American economy is actually driven by highly skilled migrant workers. And also, according to this research, one permanent highly skilled worker essentially creates 3 more jobs for the local economy in the future. We can conclude from these 3 separate lines of research that if we could provide housing for out-of-town workers, then actually these people will stay. They create at least 3 more jobs for the local economy in Christchurch. And these 3+ jobs is a key benefit to policymakers in terms of economic development. And also, you may say, our government has already put in place policies to make it easier for companies to recruit skills from overseas, like relaxation of immigration or provision of public employment services. So why should we also invest in these people's accommodation? We need to understand how much the local economy involves everyone being interdependent. This interdependence here is actually the spillover of the resources. What I'm talking about is really if those construction workers can find decent and affordable accommodation, it will help speed up the recovery and also stabilize the local housing market. For example, if we look at what really drives the speed of the rebuild, it is actually the resources of the area, especially the skills for the rebuild, and also the capability of accommodating these skills. If we look at past disaster experiences, like in New Orleans, in Kobe, in Melbourne after the bushfires, actually they are not doing well in terms of recovery time frame, not because there are not enough public efforts, but because a lack of housing and other resources, along with cost escalation, became a tipping point for local populations to decide move out or not come back. Similarly, it is a tipping point where construction organizations and individual workers decide not to come in if they've got some jobs available somewhere else. So they simply couldn't put up with the high rents, low quality living conditions, and high living cost. If we look at also what determines the cost of the rebuild, we understand that partially it is based on the cost of technical repairs or rebuild, but also it is based on the cumulative effects of delays and also the inflated rents for housing displaced owners, house owners, when their house is being repaired or rebuilt. So the spillover effects of housing inflation have a significant impact on the total cost of the rebuild. So the result is, if we invest in housing the construction workforce, we not only help with the rebuild, we actually help everyone in the area developing skills and creating jobs for the future. But what are the barriers for getting this done? As we understand, the past disaster experience is compelling and the economic logic behind this is compelling. So what are the barriers? One greatest barrier is the cost. The cost for constructing a workers' village in Christchurch for 250 units, it will cost $10 million. The likely revenue from these construction workers over 3.5 years will be 10 to 12 million. That can offset this investment and also operation cost. Also, we can say if it can accommodate 250 workers, according to the calculation we have done just now, it will create 270 new jobs for the future Christchurch economy. The second barrier is procurement. Making room for such a population can be challenging. The city needs to revise the housing and planning policies to either allow temporary or semi-permanent structures to be built in the city. It also requires a revision of zoning and building code controls to facilitate or encourage the development of different housing models. And perhaps the most profound barrier is the long-term nature of investment. This is something we invest in now for the future, and there are always time lags between when investments are made and once capital comes on stream. But if our policymakers can focus on the fact that by housing one worker, highly skilled worker, and if he or she decides to stay, it actually creates these 3+ new jobs for the local economy. And if the policymakers can also focus on the fact that it can greatly reduce the cost and timeline of the rebuild, I think that this is something we should act upon. Thank you very much.